The car door didn't open slowly. It was yanked, and Julia Caruso was pulled out by an arm she didn't see coming. Her coat soaked through in seconds, her heels catching in the gap between cobblestones. She didn't scream. She'd already done that in the car. Two men in black flanked her. A third held an umbrella over someone she couldn't yet see. Like that someone deserved shelter that she didn't. And then he stepped into the light. Dante. Your father borrowed $400,000 from my family, Miss Caruso. He had 18 months to return it. He used 9 of them to disappear, and the last 3 to die. So here we are. Julia's jaw tightened. She was terrified. She refused to look it. Julia. My father was a sick man. Whatever he owed you. Dante. Transfers. To the estate. To you. His only heir. The rain didn't let up. Neither did he. She laughed, short, disbelieving. The kind of laugh that lives right next to a sob. Julia. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I don't have $400,000. I don't have $4,000. Dante. I know. I've seen your bank statements. That landed like a fist. The intimacy of it. The invasion. Julia. Then you know you have nothing to collect. Dante. I have you. Silence. Just the rain and those 2 words sitting between them like a loaded gun. Julia. Excuse me? Dante. Your father's debt doesn't disappear because he did. The Moretti family doesn't absorb losses, Miss Caruso. We convert them. You'll come work in my household. Room, board, and a salary drawn against the principal. In 2 years, if you're useful, the debt is settled. She stared at him. If you're useful. The word scraped her skin. Julia. And if I refuse? He tilted his head just slightly, like the question was mildly interesting. Dante. Your mother's dialysis clinic receives its funding from Caruso Community Health. Caruso Community Health's lease is held through a holding company. That holding company's account manager answers to me. I'd hate for her treatment to become inconvenient. The blood drained out of Julia's face. Her mother. Of course. He'd already found the one thing she couldn't lose. Julia. You're threatening a sick woman. Dante. I'm explaining the reality of your situation. There's a difference. There wasn't. She looked at his face, really looked, trying to find something human to appeal to. What she found instead was patience. The kind of patience that didn't need her to agree. That would simply wait until she did. She thought of her mother on that hospital chair, 3 times a week, the machine keeping her alive while Julia worked double shifts at the school and told her everything was fine. Everything was fine. It hadn't been fine since her father vanished 8 months ago, leaving Julia with a mortgage she couldn't cover, a mother who didn't know, and a hole in her chest where her trust in men used to live. Now this. Julia. 2 years. Dante. 2 years. Julia. And my mother's care is protected. In writing. Something shifted in his face. Not warmth. Closer to respect. Dante. In writing. She straightened. Soaked. Trembling. Absolutely furious. Julia. Then I want my own room, a lock on the door, and Sundays off to visit her. Non negotiable. Dante studied her for 3 full seconds. Dante. Welcome to the Moretti household, Miss Caruso. She just walked into a man's world with nothing but a locked jaw and a dying mother as collateral. He just acquired a debt, or maybe a problem he didn't anticipate. If you already feel it, that pull between fear and fascination, hit subscribe. This story doesn't get softer from here. It gets realer, and you're going to want to be here for every second of what comes next. The car was the kind of quiet that costs money, leather that smelled like cedar and expensive secrets. A privacy partition between them and the driver, currently raised. Julia sat pressed against the door, as far from Dante as physics allowed. He sat in the center, legs slightly apart, studying his phone with the disinterest of a man who'd already moved on to the next problem. She hated him for that. She hated herself more for noticing the detail of his hands. The ring on his right index finger, gold, a crest she didn't recognize. The faint scar along his jaw. The controlled stillness of someone who had spent years learning to reveal nothing. Julia. What will I actually be doing? Dante. Household management. Correspondence. Whatever Rosa needs assistance with. Julia. I'm a teacher. Dante. And now you're not. The car passed through a gate that opened before it slowed. Iron. Hi. No intercom visible. The guard had been watching long before they arrived. The driveway curved through grounds that looked like a private estate transplanted from coastal Sicily into the middle of Brooklyn. Stone paths, ancient olive trees and planters. A fountain turned off for winter. The house itself was enormous. 4 stories. Limestone facade. Every window lit from inside with warm amber light that made it look almost welcoming. Almost. Because at the front door stood 2 men with the kind of stillness that wasn't peace. It was readiness. And when Dante stepped out of the car, both of them straightened in a way that wasn't just deference. It was instinctive, like standing near something powerful enough to make your body react before your brain catches up. Rosa appeared in the doorway, small, round, white-haired, in an apron that had no business existing in a home this grand. She looked at Julia with eyes that assessed and softened in the same beat. Rosa, la stanza è pronta. I made her room ready. Come, child. You look like something the rain spat out. Julia followed her inside. She didn't look back at Dante. He watched her go. Marco Fabbri was already waiting inside the study, which meant he'd been there before the call. Lean, silver-haired, with reading glasses, he pushed down his nose to look at Dante over them like a disappointed professor. Marco, you brought the girl here. Dante, she's collateral in the house. Better than collateral in the street. Marco, the Vitali family knows about Caruso's debt. Sandro Vitali has been asking questions about her. That landed differently. Dante moved to his desk without responding, poured 2 fingers of Barolo, and didn't pour a second glass, a signal Marco understood. This wasn't a conversation about options. It was a briefing. Dante. Then she stays close. What does Sandro want with her? Marco, leveri. Against you. If she's just a civilian debtor, he can use her to make you look weak, or worse, use her against you directly. Dante, she's not a civilian anymore. Marco, she doesn't know that yet. Dante, she will. The room was larger than her apartment. That was the first humiliation. The second was that it was beautiful. High ceilings, heavy drapes in burgundy and cream, a bed with an actual carved headboard, a vanity with a mirror that showed her looking exactly how she felt, wrecked. She sat on the edge of the bed and didn't cry. She'd decided in the car she wasn't going to cry, because if she started she wasn't sure she'd stop, and she needed to be sharp. She needed to think. Her phone. She opened it. 1 bar. She moved to the window, 2 bars. She called her mother. Agata. Tesoro. It's late. Julia. I know, Mama. I'm fine. I just needed to hear your voice. Agata. You sound strange. Giulia. I'm tired. New job. Temporary placement. I'll explain everything soon. She wouldn't explain everything. She'd never explain this. Agata. Come Sunday? Julia. Sunday. I promise. She hung up and sat in the silence of that beautiful, terrible room. The lock on the door worked. She checked it twice. She found him there at 6 a.m., because of course she did. Of all the rooms in that house, and there were many, she'd counted the doors, he was in the only one she'd headed for. Dante Moretti was standing at the kitchen counter in a dark sweater and trousers, reading physical newspapers, plural, and drinking espresso from a cup so small it seemed like a joke in his hand. He didn't look up when she walked in. Julia. I wasn't told where I could or couldn't go in the house. Dante. You can go anywhere except the East Wing and the study unless you're invited. Julia. And the kitchen? Dante. Clearly. She opened the refrigerator. Stared at more food than she'd had in her apartment in a month. Closed it. Opened a cabinet. Found espresso. She makes it herself, correctly, with a mocha pot she finds immediately. She knows what she's doing. He notices. Dante. You know how to use that. Julia. My grandmother was from Napoli. Don't make something of it. The smallest thing shifted in his face. Rosa found her after breakfast and handed her an actual handwritten list on actual paper. in handwriting so precise it looked typeset. Rosa. The house runs like this. Meals at 7, 1 and 7. Don Moretti takes his espresso at 6, lunch at his desk unless there's family, dinner with whoever is in residence. You will assist with correspondence. His English is perfect but his patience for email is not. You will help me coordinate the weekly deliveries and household accounts. And you will not ask questions about things that are not your business. Julia. How do I know what is and isn't my business? Rosa. If it makes you want to run, it's not your business. Julia looked at her, this small, certain woman surrounded by copper pots and dried herbs, and felt something she hadn't expected. The stirring of something almost like warmth. Julia. Is it always this? Rosa. Yes. And it's better than the alternative. Remember that. Day 1. He blew in like weather, door flung open, wet coat shrugged off and handed to no one who caught it, it fell. Voice carrying 3 rooms ahead of him. Enzo, brother. Marco says we have a house guest. He stopped when he saw Julia. His face rearranged itself immediately into something that was probably charming on a man you trusted. Enzo. The Caruso girl. I'm Enzo. The better-looking Moretti. Julia. That's a low bar. He laughed, genuinely surprised by it. Dante appeared in the doorway of the hall, watched the exchange with an expression that didn't change but contained something. Enzo. I like her. Dante. She's not here to be liked. Enzo. Don't be rude, Dante, she's a guest. Dante. She's a dead arrangement, Enzo. Don't confuse her about what this is. Julia looked at Dante, held his gaze. Julia. Don't worry. I'm very clear on what this is. He let her sit across from his desk while Marco laid out the formal agreement in plain language, because apparently even the mob needed you to sign things. The document was 3 pages. She read all of it. Line 14. The Moretti family guarantees uninterrupted access to dialysis care for Agata Caruso for the duration of the agreement. Line 22. In the event of breach by Julia Caruso, defined as unauthorized departure, disclosure, or deliberate obstruction, all protections are voided and outstanding debt becomes immediately collectible. Line 31. The arrangement may be terminated early at the sole discretion of Don Dante Moretti. At his discretion, not hers. Julia. This says you can end it early. I can't. Dante. Correct. Julia. That's not equal. Dante. No. It's not. He said it without apology, without flinching, like the imbalance of power was simply a fact of weather, not something he'd constructed deliberately. She signed it because her mother had a machine 3 times a week keeping her blood clean, and Julia had nothing else. She didn't see this, but it was happening while she signed. Sandro Vitali ate his lunch at a table in the back of a restaurant that smelled of fresh pasta and old money, and he listened to his man describe the Caruso woman with the patience of someone who collected information the way other men collected interest. Sandro. She's inside the compound. His man nodded. Sandro. Dante put a civilian woman inside his house because of a gambling debt. He either wants her, or he wants to protect her. Either way, she's useful to me. He folded his napkin. Precise. Unhurried. Sandro. Find out which day she visits the mother. She found the library by accident, following the smell of something old and paper, and stopped in the doorway because Dante was already there. He was reading. Not a newspaper. An actual novel. And there was classical music playing, low, from a speaker she couldn't find, something she recognized without being able to name it. He didn't look up. Dante. Mahler. Simponi numero 5. You can come in. She didn't know he'd heard her. She came in anyway. The shelves went floor to ceiling on 3 walls. She scanned spines, Italian, English, Latin, some she couldn't identify. History, philosophy, fiction and ratios that surprised her. Julia. Have you read all of these? Dante. Most. Julia. That's not what I expected. Dante. What did you expect? Julia. Gun catalogs. Sports betting spreadsheets. The corner of his mouth moved. Maybe. Dante. There's Caruso on the 3rd shelf left side. If you need something to read. She looked. He meant Enrico Caruso, the tenor's biography. She pulled it out. Opened the first page. Found a handwritten inscription in Italian. She didn't quite have the vocabulary for. She didn't ask about it. She was carrying a tray of correspondence folders Rosa had asked her to deliver, because that was her life now, when she heard voices through the study door that was not quite closed. Marco's voice clipped in urgent. Then Dante's quieter. Marco. Vitali's man was seen outside the dialysis center this afternoon. Her feet stopped. Her blood stopped. Dante, alone. Marco. Two of them. They didn't go in. Just watched. Dante, he's testing me. Marco. He's doing more than testing. If he uses the mother. Dante, he won't. I'll put men on the clinic. Marco. Dante. The girl doesn't know how exposed her mother is. If she finds out. Dante. She won't find out from us. Julia stood in the hallway with a folder of correspondence and the slow, cold realization that the danger she thought she was in was the surface layer of something much deeper. She knocked. Twice. Julia. The correspondence Rosa asked me to. Dante. Leave it outside the door. She did. She walked back to her room with very careful steps and sat on the edge of that beautiful bed, and thought about her mother, and men who watched from parking lots, and a Don who had not mentioned any of this to her. Trust. She'd never had it with men. Her father had cured her of it thoroughly. Here was her cure's apprentice. Rosa made her sit at the table. Not the kitchen. The actual dining room, with the actual family, which turned out to mean Dante, Enzo, Marco, and Padre Luca, who arrived at 7 p.m. like religion ran on a schedule, which she supposed it did. Enzo talked. He talked beautifully, effortlessly, filling silences before they became uncomfortable, asking Julia questions that were flattering without being intrusive. She answered him. Watched Dante across the table, who watched her watch Enzo. Enzo. What do you miss most? About teaching. She thought about it honestly. Julia. The children aren't complicated yet. They haven't learned to hide what they mean. A beat. Enzo, lucky kids. Dante. She means it as a compliment. She means it as a loss. She looked at him. He'd understood precisely what she meant, articulated the thing she hadn't finished. She didn't know what to do with that. Julia, both. Dante. Si. She was almost asleep when the knock came. Not at the door. At the window. 3rd floor. She was on her feet before she thought about it, heart hammering. Pressed against the wall next to the window. Looked. A face. A man she didn't know, mid-30s, in dark clothes, holding something up against the glass. A photograph. Her mother, exiting the dialysis center. Date stamp. Today. She opened the window 6 inches. Man. Sandro Vitali wants you to know he can reach anyone, anywhere. He has a message for Don Moretti. You carry it. Julia. I'm not a messenger. Man. The message is. He wants 10% of the Moretti Brooklyn operations transferred to Vitali by the end of the month, or the woman on dialysis has an accident on her way home one night. Silence. Man. You understand what I'm asking? She understood that her mother was now leverage in a war she'd inherited with her father's debt. She understood that this man was waiting for an answer she couldn't give without Dante. And going to Dante meant admitting she'd heard things through closed doors. She understood that the trap she'd thought was 2 years of household work was, in fact, something else entirely. Julia. Tell Mr. Vitali I received his message. She closed the window and went to find Dante. She knocked on the study door hard enough to hurt her knuckles. He opened it. He was still dressed. She'd learn later he rarely slept before 2, and his expression shifted when he saw her face. Julia. A man came to my window. 3rd floor. He works for someone called Sandro Vitali. Everything in Dante went very, very still. Dante. What did he say? She told him. All of it. She watched his jaw set, watched the stillness become something else. Not fury, not quite. Dante's anger didn't make noise. It reorganized. He walked past her into the hall and said 2 words to the guard at the end of it. In Italian, quietly, and the man was gone in seconds. Dante. Come inside. Julia. I'll stand here. Dante, Julia. She'd never heard him use her first name before. Just that. The weight of it. She went inside. He sat across from her, not behind his desk, beside it, in the chair that faced hers. For the first time, there was no furniture acting as a barrier and a statement. Dante. Sandro Vitali has wanted a piece of my territory for 3 years. He's been looking for leverage, something personal enough to make me flinch. He found your mother. Julia. Before I signed your contract. Dante. Yes. Julia. You knew this was possible. Dante. I knew it was likely. The silence between them crystallized. Julia. You brought me inside this house not just to collect a debt. You brought me inside so I'd be harder to use against you. He didn't flinch. He didn't deny it. Dante. Both things can be true. Julia. Is my mother safe right now? Dante. I have men at the clinic as of 2 hours ago. Julia. You already knew. Dante. I told you. I knew it was likely. She breathed. Carefully. Through the fury. Julia. You used me. Dante. I protected you. Julia. You did both without telling me. Those aren't the same thing. Something in his face shifted, too small to name. Closer to acknowledgement than apology, but real. They sat with it for a moment. The clock on his desk ticked. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city breathed. Julia. I want the truth from now on. About things that involve my mother or my safety. I don't need to know your business, your operations, your whatever this is. But anything that touches me or Mama, I want to know. Dante. That's not how this household. Julia. I didn't ask how this household works. I told you what I need to function in it. If you want me calm and capable and not a liability, you give me that. He studied her the way he studied his newspapers. Like he was reading past the headline. Dante agreed. She stood. Julia. Good night, Don Moretti. Dante. She paused. Turned. Dante. You can use my name. She left without responding. But she didn't tell him no. Days 3 to 7. A week inside the Moretti compound taught Julia things textbooks never would. Day 3. She watched Dante take a call that lasted 9 seconds, and end with 2 words in Sicilian dialect. Marco appeared with a folder 3 minutes later. She didn't ask. Day 4. Rosa handed her the weekly household accounts and told her to find the error. She found it in 11 minutes. A duplicate transfer to a linen vendor, $3,200. Rosa looked at her like she'd just done something marvelous. Day 5. Enzo brought lunch to the office they'd set up for her. A room off the kitchen, smaller than the study with decent light. And sat with her for 40 minutes talking about restaurants in Napoli, his mother's cooking, the one time he'd tried to make pesto and poisoned everyone. He was charming. She was careful. Day 6. Dante appeared in her office at 4 in the afternoon without knocking, put a manila folder on her desk, and said, English translation by morning. Walked out. She looked at the folder. 50 pages of Italian legal correspondence. She worked until 1 a.m. and left it outside his study door. Day 7, 6 a.m. She found her coffee already made in the kitchen. Perfect. Exactly how she'd made it herself. He was already gone. Day 8. She came down to find him at the counter, not reading this time. Just standing, espresso cup in hand, looking at nothing. He turned when she entered and she saw something she wasn't supposed to see. Exhaustion. Real raw unguarded. He'd been awake all night. She didn't say anything about it. She made her coffee. Poured a second cup, more than he'd asked for from the larger pot, not the mocha, and set it near him without comment. He looked at it. Dante. My father built this house. She waited. Dante. He built it for my mother. She lived in it for 4 years before she died. He used to say a house that size should have 10 children in it. We never made it past 2. Julia looked at the kitchen. At the copper pots and the herb bundles and the enormous stone fireplace that Rosa kept laid but never lit. And understood suddenly that the warmth in this house was architectural, not emotional. A stage set for a life that had hollowed out. Julia. I'm sorry about your mother. Dante. She would have liked you. He said it simply, like it was a fact he'd just confirmed. She didn't know what to do with that either. Enzo found her between the olive trees on day 9, where she'd started taking her lunch when the weather allowed, just to feel open air. Enzo, he likes you. Julia. He tolerates me. Enzo. Dante doesn't tolerate people. He removes them or uses them. You're still here, and you're not being used the way he uses most people. That's his version of affection. Julia. That's a terrible version. Enzo. He grew up watching our father run this family. Love was for dinner on Sundays and funerals. Everything else was leverage. She looked at him. He was smiling, but the smile didn't reach the same place in his eyes. Julia. What about you? Enzo, me? I loved everyone too much. It's my greatest flaw. There was something underneath that. She caught it but let it go. Day 10. She was on her way back from the pharmacy, medication pickup for Rosa, the only errand she was allowed outside, when the car pulled up beside her. Not Moretti's. A woman in a gray coat stepped out. 40, sharp, with ID she showed and pocketed so fast Julia barely read it. FBI Agent Caldwell. Miss Caruso. I'm Agent Caldwell. I'd love 3 minutes. Julia. I don't. Agent Caldwell. We know where you're living. We know about your father's debt. We know about Dante Moretti. What we want to know is whether you're there voluntarily. Julia. Yes. Agent Caldwell. Convincingly so. Julia. I signed a contract. I'm an employee. Agent Caldwell. You're a civilian inside the compound of one of the 5 most surveilled organized crime figures in the Northeast. Julia. I'm aware of what he is. Agent Caldwell. Then you understand I have an obligation to ask. Would you be willing to? Julia. No. Absolutely not. Agent Caldwell looked at her, measuring. Agent Caldwell. The offer stands. My card if you change your mind. Julia took it. She put it in her pocket. She walked back to the compound and stood outside the gate for 30 seconds, deciding, before she pressed the buzzer. She went inside. She didn't throw the card away. She told him about Caldwell. Directly, sitting across from him at his desk, looking him in the eye. He didn't react the way she expected. No furi. No acquiescence. He took the card she handed him. She decided transparency was her only real protection. Turned it over once and set it on the desk. Dante. You told her no. Julia. I told her no. Dante. Why? The question surprised her. She'd expected him to accept the information and move on. Instead he was asking her to examine herself. Julia. Because my mother's care is in your hands. Because I signed a contract that benefits us both. Because going to the FBI with nothing but, I live in a large house, would only destroy everything without protecting anyone. Dante. All practical reasons. Julia. They're the only kind I have. He looked at her for a moment. Dante. Keep the card. You may need it. Not for me, for yourself. If things go wrong, not with our arrangement. Other things. She didn't understand that yet. She would. Agata Caruso was smaller than Julia remembered. Or maybe the machine made her seem smaller. The tubing, the chair. The process of having your blood cleaned outside your body and returned to you. 3 hours, 3 times a week, for the rest of your life. Julia brought ricotta pastries from a bakery on the way and sat beside her for the full 3 hours and told her about the new job. A wealthy household, private family, good pay. Agata. Is the man decent? Julia. He's. She thought of his hands around the espresso cup. The Mahler. The way he'd said her mother would have liked her. Julia. He's complicated. Agata. Tesoro. All the ones worth knowing are. On the way out, she passed the 2 men she'd been told were there for security. She recognized them now, she'd learned to. They didn't nod or acknowledge her. They were just present. And for the first time, that presence felt less like surveillance and more like a promise kept. She didn't know how to feel about that. She knocked to return a book she'd borrowed from his shelf, he'd insisted, and heard voices. She was about to leave when she heard a name. Sandro. She stood still. Enzo's voice, lower than usual. She doesn't know anything, I promise you. She's just household staff. A pause. Listening. Enzo again. Give me more time, Sandro, I just need more time. She backed away from the door and returned to her room with the book still in her hand and the cold, spreading understanding that the rot in this house wasn't all coming from outside. He was there again in the library, same chair, same low music, different composer, something she'd later identify as Puccini. She stood in the doorway and he looked up this time. Giulia. I think your brother is talking to Sandro Vitali. The music played. He didn't move. Dante. What did you hear? She told him. He listened without interruption. When she finished, he set his book down, closed it, placed it on the side table with a deliberateness that was its own kind of grief. Dante. How long have you been carrying this? Giulia. About 40 minutes. I came directly. Dante. Why? Giulia. Because I said I would. He looked at her, and this time the thing in his face wasn't just acknowledgement. It was something older and more difficult. Dante. Thank you. Giulia. Don't thank me. Tell me if I'm in danger. Dante. You're not. I won't let you be. Giulia. You didn't let me be in danger when Sandro sent a man to my window either. And yet. His jaw tightened. The first real fracture she'd seen. Dante. I know. Dante called Marco. Marco arrived in 12 minutes, which told Giulia this was not the kind of call you took your time on. She waited in the hall while they spoke. She didn't eavesdrop this time. Dante came out alone. His face was arranged into the composed expression she was learning to read beneath. And beneath it was something she'd never seen on him before. Pain. Dante. Enzo's been feeding Vitali information for 6 months. Locations, schedules, the timing of our operations. He told him about your mother's clinic before I brought you in. Giulia, he set this up. Dante. He was trying to force a deal between us and the Vitali family by creating pressure I couldn't ignore. He thought if Vitali threatened what I cared about. He stopped. Looked at her. Giulia. He thought you'd fold. Dante. He thought wrong. She saw his hands, hanging at his sides very still. The stillness of someone containing something enormous. Giulia. What happens to him? A beat. Dante. He's my brother. Giulia. I know. What happens to him? Dante. Not tonight. If you're still here, you already know this isn't just a story. It's a descent into a world where love and violence are the same language, where protection looks like possession, and surrender feels like power. He's running out of ways to keep her safe without keeping her captive. She's running out of reasons to fight him when fighting feels like the only thing keeping her alive. Subscribe because the people who stay for this kind of darkness understand that the most dangerous thing you can do is fall for someone who was never supposed to let you live. Day 12. Enzo was gone by morning. Not dead. She'd asked Rosa with her eyes, and Rosa had given her the smallest shake of her head. Not dead, but gone. Sent to a property in Connecticut, Marco said when she asked directly. Family matters. Translation. Removed before Dante made a decision he couldn't walk back. The compound felt different without him. Quieter. Heavier. Dante did not come to the kitchen at 6. At 8, Rosa found her and said simply, he didn't sleep. Leave him until 10. At 10, Giulia knocked on the study door. He opened it. He'd showered and changed, but his eyes held the hollowed quality of someone who had stood at a ledge all night and chosen, repeatedly, not to step off. Giulia. I'm going to make you actual food. Not espresso. Actual food. He stared at her. Giulia. Sit down, Don Moretti. You look terrible. Something almost collapsed in his face. He stepped back from the door. She went to the kitchen. She made uva in purgatorio, eggs and tomato sauce, because her grandmother had made it for every crisis and Giulia knew no other response to a man falling apart at his breakfast table. He sat at the kitchen counter and didn't speak. She cooked and didn't force conversation, and the Puccini from the library drifted down the hall, and the kitchen smelled of garlic and crushed tomatoes and old grief. She put the plate in front of him. He picked up the fork. Dante. My brother told Vitali about your mother's clinic 2 days before I brought you in. Giulia. I know. Dante. Which means you were already at risk when I offered you the contract. The contract didn't protect you. It pulled you into a war. Julia. Would you have told me if you'd known then? Silence. Dante. I don't know. She sat across from him with her own coffee. Julia. At least that's honest. Dante. I would have found another way to protect your mother. Julia. But you still would have protected her. Dante. Yes. She looked at this man, this infuriating, contained, genuinely terrifying man, and felt the architecture of her resistance begin, slowly, to shift. She hated her own biology. Day 13. He brought her into the planning. Not all of it, but enough. He sat across from her and told her what Sandro Vitali actually wanted. Not just the Brooklyn operations, but access to the port logistics that ran through Moretti infrastructure. The port was the engine of everything. Dante. He's been building toward this for 18 months. Your father's debt was useful to him because it gave him a reason to insert himself. Julia. My father owed money to the Moretti family. Vitali found out. Dante. Vitali found out through Enzo, who was working with him before I ever knew your name. Julia. So my father borrowing from you wasn't random. Dante. No. She let that sit. Julia. Was my father killed? The word landed between them with its full weight. Dante. Your father died of heart failure in a motel in Atlantic City. I had nothing to do with it. But I believe Vitali arranged the conditions. Julia looked at her hands on the desk. Julia. He arranged my father's death so his debt would transfer to me. So I'd become leverage. Dante. Against me. Yes. Julia. And Enzo helped him do it. Pause. Dante. Yes. She nodded. Once. Held it together through sheer structural will. Julia. What do you need me to do? Day 14. They worked for 6 hours without breaking. Julia translated documents, cross-referenced shipping manifests, found the account names Vitali had used to funnel payments to Enzo, because she could spot financial irregularities the way she could spot misspelled names in a class register. It was the same skill. Pattern recognition. Dante watched her work with an expression she was only just learning to read. At hour 4, she found the key entry, a dummy vendor for payments, timed to coincide with 4 of Moretti's largest operations over 8 months. Julia here. Here's your proof. He stood behind her to look at the screen. She felt him before she registered the warmth. His presence registered differently now, not as threat but as something adjacent to safety, which was its own kind of alarming. His hand landed on the back of her chair, not touching her, but close. Dante. You found this in 4 hours. Julia. I told you. I'm good with numbers. Dante. You're good with everything they put in front of you. She turned to respond and found him closer than she'd calculated. The distance between them resolved itself into something that required a decision. She made it. She turned back to the screen. Julia. What do you need from the other manifests? She was alone when Agent Caldwell's card surfaced from the bottom of her jacket pocket. She'd been carrying it for 2 weeks. She set it on the desk and looked at it. She had enough now. She had Enzo's payment trail, the vendor accounts, Vitali's name on 3 separate transactions. Enough for a federal investigation that could dismantle the Vitali family entirely. She also had Moretti's name on contracts, on property records, on a household she'd been living in for 14 days. Whatever she handed over would be a bomb with a timer she couldn't control. And whatever she was starting to feel about the man in the study down the hall, she had to examine that, dispassionately, before she made any decision. Her father had left her a debt, a dying mother, and a lesson she should have learned faster. Some men protect you by consuming you. They call it love and it looks like bars on a window. Was that Dante? She thought of the coffee already made at 6 a.m. The Mahler. The truth delivered without softening but without cruelty. The way he'd said, I won't let you be in danger, and then immediately acknowledged when he'd failed. She put the card back in her pocket. She went back to the manifests. Day 15. Marco found her before Rosa did, which she suspected meant he'd tried to be there first. Marco. You should know something about Dante that he won't tell you himself. Julia. If he won't tell me, maybe it's not yours to share. Marco. His last significant relationship ended because the woman was feeding information to a competitor. He handled it. He handled it the way this family handles things. He hasn't been accessible since. Julia. Why are you telling me this? Marco. Because you're the first person he's brought information to since then. The first person he's worked beside. And you're carrying an FBI agent's card in your pocket. Her blood stopped. Marco. I know about the approach. I know you haven't called her. I know you took it because you're smart enough to keep options open, not because you plan to use it. Julia. Then why? Marco. Because if Dante finds out about the card before you tell him, and he will find out, it will look like exactly what it isn't. And you will lose the one thing that might actually keep you safe in this world. Julia. His trust. Marco. What's left of it? Day 15. She was going to tell him about the card. She'd decided. She was walking to his study when the sound arrived. Not an explosion, nothing cinematic. Just a phone ringing, and voices in the hall, and Marco running, which she had never seen before, and her entire nervous system firing at once. She stopped in the hall. A guard she recognized put himself between her and the front door without being asked. Sound vehicles. Multiple. Outside the gate. Dante came out of his study already on the phone. He looked at her immediately, not checking on her, cataloging her position, knowing where she was. Dante. Get her to the East Wing. Now. Guard, signore. Dante. Now Santo. Julia. What's happening? Dante. Vitali moved up his timeline. He has 4 cars outside, and I think he has someone inside who told him when our men would be at minimum. He looked at her. The fullness of the situation passed between them like current. Dante. Julia. I need you to go with Santo. I need you to trust me. Julia. Tell me you're going to be standing here when this is over. The question shocked him. She could see it. Could see something crack open in his face that he didn't bother to close. Dante. Si. I'll be here. She went. She'd never been here. She understood now why. The East Wing was a different kind of room. No books. No music. A safe room. Concrete behind the plaster, she'd guess, with a table, chairs, a monitor showing feeds from the property cameras, and Rosa already sitting in one of the chairs like she'd lived through this before. She probably had. Santo stood at the door. On the monitor, Julia could see the gate, the driveway, Dante's men taking positions. She could see Dante. He stood in the center of the drive like a man who'd decided the front was the only place worth being. Rosa. Don't look at the monitor. Julia. I can't not. Rosa. Then pray. It's better than looking. Julia didn't pray. She watched. The standoff lasted 11 minutes. She counted. What she saw wasn't violence. It was negotiation in a language she couldn't hear. Across a gate she couldn't pass. Between a man she'd come to rely on and a man who wanted to use her to destroy him. At minute 11 the Vitali cars moved back. Not a retreat. A repositioning. Dante came to the door himself. He was unhurt. He nodded at Santo who left. Rosa looked at Julia, a look that contained its own language, and said she needed to check on the kitchen. They were alone. Julia. Enzo told Vitali when your men would be at minimum staffing tonight. Dante. Yes. Julia. So your brother. Dante. He's not my brother anymore. The finality of it. Julia. Dante. Dante. He has until morning to leave the country. Marco arranged it. After that, whatever Vitali does to him is not my concern. She understood. She didn't approve. She understood. Julia. Vitali isn't done. Dante. No. Julia. He's going to come back harder. Dante. Yes. Julia. Which means my mother. Dante. Is already at a private facility. Under a different name. As of 2 hours ago. She stared at him. Julia. You moved my mother. Dante. She's safe. She thinks it's a routine transfer for better equipment. I had Rosa make the calls. Julia. Without asking me. Dante. Without time to ask you. She breathed through the complicated fire of it. The invasion, the relief, the fury, the gratitude, all of them arriving at once. She took Agent Caldwell's card from her pocket and put it on the table between them. Dante looked at it. Then at her. Julia. She approached me 2 weeks ago. I told her no. I kept the card because I was keeping options open. Marco told me you'd find out. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Silence. Dante, have you called her? Julia. No. Dante, have you contacted anyone? Julia. No. He picked up the card. Turned it over. Set it back down. Dante, why are you telling me this? Julia. Because I said I would be honest. Because you've been honest with me, eventually if not always first. Because. She stopped. Julia. Because I don't want to be another person in your life who turns out to have been something else. That landed somewhere specific in him. She watched it happen. Dante, Julia. Julia. Don't say something you'll make impossible for yourself later. Dante. I was going to say, I know. She brought him everything. The entire financial trail. Every vendor account, every payment, Enzo's coordination, Vitali's signature across 4 transactions that could only mean personal involvement. She spread it across his desk and stood beside him while he read it. Dante. You built a case. Julia. I cross-reference 14 months of manifests in 2 weeks. I know what doesn't belong. Dante. This would end him. Not my way, the legal way. Julia. Isn't that better? He considered that. For a man for whom the legal way was rarely the way, the question had weight. Dante. If we use this through Caldwell, I give the FBI information that dismantles Vitali. They get their case. Your mother's safe. It ends. Julia. And you. Dante. My operations aren't in this evidence package. The manifests are Vitali's. The payments are Vitali's. Julia. I know. I made sure of that. He looked at her. Julia. I'm not naive. I'm practical. I wanted a solution that didn't require you to become the problem. He reached across the desk. His hand covered hers, briefly, deliberately. Dante, grazie. She turned her hand over. Let it. Just for a second. Julia called Agent Caldwell. The call lasted 4 minutes. She gave the summary. Caldwell asked 3 questions. The 4th question was, are you safe? Julia looked through the study door at Dante, who was on his own phone 20 feet away, running his half of this in parallel, because he'd agreed to let her use her half, and she'd agreed to let him manage his, and somehow they'd arrived at something that looked like partnership. Julia. Yes. I'm safe. The FBI moved on Vitali operations within 36 hours. The financial evidence was clean. Julia had made it clean, and 3 federal warrants followed. Sandro Vitali was arrested outside a restaurant in Red Hook on a Tuesday morning, mid-meal, the kind of arrest that serves as a message to everyone who saw it happen. Enzo was on a flight to Palermo. Whether he stayed there was his own problem. Her mother returned to her regular clinic on Thursday, never knowing she'd been moved, never knowing why, never knowing the name Moretti or Vitali, or that her dead husband's gambling had nearly gotten her killed. Some lies, Julia decided, were a form of love. 3 days later, the house had quieted in the way things quiet after a crisis. Not peaceful exactly, but relieved, like a chest unclenching after a long-held breath. She found him in the library. Same chair. Different music. She still couldn't name it. Something without words. She sat in the chair across from him this time. Not in the doorway. He looked at her. Julia. My 2 years are up. Dante. You've been here 3 weeks. Julia. The contract specifies 2 years. But the terms were debt repayment. The evidence I gave Caldwell, Vitali's prosecution will result in the recovery of assets that more than cover my father's debt. Marco confirmed the math. Dante was very still. Julia. The contract's fulfilled. I can go. Dante. Yes. Julia. I want to know if you want me to. The question sat in the room like something living. He put his book down. Closed it. The deliberateness of the gesture. She knew it now, knew it meant he was giving her his actual attention. Dante. What I want and what's good for you are not the same thing, Julia. Julia. I know that. Answer the question. Dante looked at her for a long time. Long enough that she felt it in her chest. The waiting. Dante. You came here terrified and you translated legal documents until 1 in the morning. You sat across from me and demanded truth when most people in this world flinched to look at me directly. You cooked me eggs in tomato sauce when my brother broke something I can't name. And you didn't pretend it wasn't broken. You made yourself useful, and then you made yourself indispensable, and then you made yourself. He stopped. Julia, say it. Dante. Necessary. In a way nothing in my life has been in a very long time. She stood up. Crossed the room. Stopped in front of his chair. The small distance between them requiring nothing but a decision. Julia. I came here for my mother. I stayed because I'm stubborn. I'm telling you I want to stay because She stopped. Julia. Because you're the most complicated man I've ever been angry at, and the only one I've trusted in 3 years. And I know what you are. I know your world. I'm not romantic about it. Dante. Good. Because romance would be dishonest. Julia. I know. Dante. My world doesn't soften, Julia. It doesn't get safer. There will be other Sandros. Other crises. Other nights in the East Wing. Julia. I know that too. Dante. You should go back to teaching. Julia. Probably. Neither of them moved. Dante. Julia. Julia. Say my name again like that, and you won't have to say anything else. He stood. In the space he created, she was very close, and he put one hand against her face, 2 fingers along her jaw, with the careful deliberateness of a man handling something he finally understands the value of. Dante, stay. Julia. Ask me properly. Dante. Please. She kissed him. Or he kissed her. It was the kind of thing that begins from both sides simultaneously. 2 people who have been circling the same fire long enough that finally entering it feels less like choice and more like physics. Days later. She didn't move back to her apartment. She didn't go back to teaching, either. Not yet. She called the school director and asked for a leave of absence, framing it vaguely. The director, who was warm and shrewd and asked no questions Julia couldn't answer, said the position would hold. Her mother came for Sunday dinner 3 weeks later. A Moretti Sunday dinner, which meant the full table, Rosa's cooking, Padre Luca arriving on schedule with his diplomatic smile. Agata Caruso sat across from Dante Moretti and looked at him the way mothers look at men beside their daughters, assessing, instinctive, merciless. At the end of the evening, while Julia cleared plates, Agata leaned over to Dante and said something in Neapolitan dialect too fast for Julia to catch. Dante's expression shifted. Softened, actually softened, in a way she'd only ever seen with her. Julia. What did she say? Dante. She said she knows what I am, and she's going to pray for me anyway. Julia. And? Dante. Don't make my daughter regret you. She looked at him. Julia, don't. Dante. I don't intend to. The contract was voided. Marco had the paperwork drawn by a lawyer whose relationship to Moretti operations was deliberately unclear. Julia reviewed every line herself. It was clean. Enzo remained in Palermo. He called Dante once. Julia heard Dante's side of the call from the hallway, standing still while he said, "You're alive. That's enough." He hung up. He didn't call back. Agent Caldwell's prosecution of Sandro Vitali moved forward without Moretti's name in a single filing. Caldwell called once. Julia took the call. Agent Caldwell. You're still there? Julia. Yes. Agent Caldwell. That a choice? Julia. Yes. Agent Caldwell. Card still good if you ever need it. Julia. I know. Thank you. She kept it. In the same jacket pocket. She didn't think she'd need it. She wasn't naive enough to throw it away. 6 a.m. The kitchen. Coffee already made. But this time she'd made it, because she'd gotten there first, and she left his on the counter where he'd find it. He came in 3 minutes later. Saw the cup. Saw her at the window with her own, watching the garden where the olive trees in their planters were beginning, very slowly, to bloom despite the cold. He stood beside her. Close enough to be a fact. Julia. Do you ever wish you'd built something else? He thought about it. Really thought. She could feel the quality of his silence. Dante. I was born into this. I could have walked away. I didn't. Julia. Why? Dante. Because the alternative was abandoning it to someone who couldn't, hold it the way I do. Julia. Hold it like what? Dante. Like something worth protecting, even when it costs. She turned to look at him. He was already looking at her. Julia. I came here for my mother. Dante. I know. Julia. I stayed for. Dante. I know. The garden. The olive trees. The morning light coming in at the angle that made everything look like it had been placed deliberately, which in this house it had. His hand found hers. He didn't look away from the window. She didn't either. Outside, 2 men were already at their posts. Inside, the coffee was perfect. Outside, the city was beginning, the way it always began, without regard for what had happened the night before. Inside, Julia Caruso, who had come here terrified, who had been lied to and leveraged and then slowly, grudgingly, given truth, thought about trust. About what it costs to rebuild it after betrayal breaks it. About how some things don't go back to what they were, because they become something different entirely. Better. Harder. Permanent. Her father had borrowed from a dangerous man and run away, and left his debt to his daughter. She had paid it, not in money, in time, in truth, in the courage to look at something frightening and choose it anyway. She thought that was enough. She thought it might be more than enough. Dante's hand was warm and certain around hers. Outside, Brooklyn breathed. If this story found you when you needed it, pass it on to someone who understands that some love stories are written in blood and sealed with sacrifice. If you've ever been caught between the monster you should fear and the man you can't stop wanting. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, saddled with a debt that wasn't yours, or forced to build trust from the ruins of what someone else destroyed, you belong here. Subscribe so these stories keep finding the people who need them. Julia came for survival. She stayed for something she didn't expect. And that, the thing you don't expect, the thing that costs you everything and gives you back more. That's exactly what this channel is for.